Right, welcome back. We've got Zwelinzima Vavi back on the line. He's the General Secretary of the South African Federation of Trade Unions. We're talking about National Treasury's attempts to try and reduce the expenditure on the public sector wage bill. I'm going to skip to that next question that we were about to get to, if I may, Mr. Vavi, that the wage bill for public sector or public servants gobbles up about 30% of our total expenditure. And unfortunately, that crowds out spending on capital projects for future growth, as well as items crucial for service delivery. We know that for our economy to grow is the most critical thing at the moment. Otherwise, we're heading for a seriously dangerous downward spiral. Do you think that reducing expenditure on the public sector wage bill is an acceptable sacrifice to make today in order to secure growth for tomorrow?
Well, we have to look at the total picture. And firstly, we've got to debunk the lies, the propaganda, the misinformation that is being repeated every day by the conservative economists and who support the Treasury's line of economic thinking. And that makes basically three statements that they keep on repeating until it now has settled as the truth in the minds of ordinary people, including many media houses in our country. The first lie they keep on repeating is that the public sector in South Africa is bloated. And when they say so, they won't tell the Republic that actually the numbers in the public sector, in particular in the frontline services, leave much to be desired. Public sector in South Africa is sitting at 1.2 million people. That's about 2% of the entire population of 62 million South Africans for now. You can't ask a mere 2% of the population to give you best of services in the hospitals, schools, correctional services, army, and home affairs, social services, you name them all. Even the World Bank, as way back as 2015, at that time, they were saying that the public sector size in comparison to the population in South Africa was 3.1%. And they made the conclusion that actually in other middle-income countries, the numbers of public sector workers are averaging at 6% of the population. But in South Africa, we are being told every day that no, the public service is bloated. The second point that we have to debunk is that the public sector wages are too high and that they crowd out other expenditure. Nobody looks at the totality of the picture. The reality is this. It is not just only the public sector wages. It is not just the fact that more than 20 million of South Africans are getting the support from the public sector in the form of the social services. It is not just that our debt levels may not be sustainable if we do not address the crisis of an economy that is not growing. All of these things must be factored. They must sit together, and the statement that it will make is that if you don't grow the economy, if you don't have a growth strategy, and therefore if you do not have a strategy to increase the levels of investment by both the private sector and the public sector, eventually in the long run, your debt and fiscal policies are going to be in a crisis. But we are not in a crisis now. And let's face it, the debt to GDP level at 71% and towards 77% is not the highest from our historical point of view. At some point, the debt to GDP level in South Africa was sitting above 100%. The average debt to GDP in the rest of the world is sitting at 69% when you compare South Africa with other middle-income countries. So the lie that we are facing a debt crisis, we are facing a fiscal cliff, is all designed to accept the propaganda that we have enough numbers of teachers when the public sector report just 2 weeks ago demonstrated that in some schools the numbers of the teachers have dwindled to the fact that in a single class you can see or have about 169, 170 students in front of just one teacher. You can't tell us that there is enough numbers of police in South Africa or enough numbers of healthcare when in the Northwest you have one dentist for a population of 15,000, and that in Mpumalanga you have one psychologist for a population of 100,000. You can't tell
Mr. Vavi,
us
I'm
that
going to
this
jump
is okay.
in there. The specific sectors that you're talking about here are some of those sectors that are going to see more funding. However, we've seen Treasury say that those non-labour intensive, non-critical sectors is where they're going to shift increases in wages to provincial expenditure. What's SAFTU's reaction to that?
We would want to see who are these people they saying are not critical staff in the public sector. Because the bulk of the public sector is made up of police, of correctional services staff, of the army, of the public hospital workers, and of the home affairs, of the people who are looking after our borders, and all of that. What are they talking about when they're saying that they are uncritical staff, that they are not going to increase their salaries or even reduce their salaries? The point that we're making from the SAFTU point of view is that we have a crisis of the shortages of numbers in the public sector as we speak. We have 1.2 million that have been sitting in that number when the population has now grown to 62 million. In fact, the growth of the population without the growth of the public sector numbers demonstrate the fact that you are going to have even longer queues in the public hospitals, police stations, correctional services are continuously getting even more overcrowded, more than any other part of the world, by the way. And that's why we're breeding criminality in our correctional services centers, because we simply just don't have the numbers to look after the people who is supposed to be correcting. So we have a crisis of the numbers in the public sector, and that crisis we must demand that government must fill the vacancies instead of threatening the existing jobs. At some point, we were sitting with a vacancy rate of 200,000, 40,000 in the health sector alone. And you can't tell me that this is okay for a developing country with such massive developmental backlogs as South Africa has.
We're definitely going to have to get more information on that from Treasury, exactly what they mean by non-critical or non-labour intensive workers. Thank you very much for speaking to us. That is unfortunately where we're going to have to leave it for this evening, but the topic does require a revisit. That was SAFTU's Zwelinzima Vavi.